Hi and welcome. I'm Josh Sharp. Today, I have with me Calvin Witcher, and we're going to have an amazing, awesome conversation. He's an incredibly interesting guy with six kids, and he's got a story around that and all sorts of different stuff. But what we're going to talk about today is really discuss this idea of this series of interviews has been centered around how do I create a business that serves my lifestyle and serves me versus having to serve it. And one of the things that Calvin really specializes in is how do you use your intuition to make those decisions that guide you, and to become more in touch with that, and to really own that and exercise that muscle within yourself, and to be guided by that. And just like to thank him for coming out today and to talking with us and sharing some of these insights. And he's a very busy man with, like I said, with six kids, and he does speaking and coaching and all sorts of different stuff. So first off, just thanks for being here, Calvin. I really appreciate having to have a chance to talk with you today.
Well, Josh, thank you so much for having me here. I am so excited to be here as well. Thank
Cool,
you.
very cool. So just kind of first off, what's kind of how did you get started in this to begin with? Like what kind of led you down this road to being a speaker and a coach and doing the work that you do? What kind of brought you to here?
Okay. I am what 32 now, so it's been 32-year journey till this point, and but I will give the very short version of it. I promise. I grew up in the Christian church, and like any good Christian boy, I was in church 3 to 4 times a week, and I remember at an early age having a lot of just spiritual experiences and a lot that I really couldn't explain. At the time, it took years to really get to the place of understanding of that, and I learned over the years to really be comfortable with that and to just grow in that that lifestyle. That's really what it turned out to be. And then over the years, that really has transitioned now from a Christian perspective to more of a universal spiritual perspective now. So I do a lot of pretty much everything I do is within the gifting of intuition. Is how do we access it? How do we use it? How do we understand it? And it's pretty much exactly what you said. How do we use it to create the lifestyle that we ultimately want and desire? And so now I have a spiritual center. I do coaching and mentoring. I do a lot of speaking and training as well. We have a couple of workshops and things that are in the works now in the next couple of months. And it's all centered around the principle of using your intuition to really create that journey for you. So that's it.
It's really good stuff. I mean, when we were chatting before, um, and I love this idea of your intuition, because it's we think we got to like logically think through things sometimes, and there is an element to that always happens,
Sure.
right? But what do you define as your intuition? Like what does that mean? What does that mean to you?
That's a great question, Josh. When a lot of people have, there's a lot of different definitions of intuition if you go out there and look it up. The way I really define it is aligning yourself with the communication that is already there and is already existent out there. And it's really about getting in touch with that communication and allow that communication to really bring about an understanding of your life, to bring about a clarity in your life, and ultimately bring about a creation in your life that all of us really want, but not a lot of us haven't learned how to do just yet. So that's what really intuition is for me. It's aligning with that communication that's always ongoing.
Okay, okay. So tell me, when we first chatted, you kind of had you live in California now, right? So
I do, right? I guess in the Los Angeles area, but closer in the Inland Empire
okay,
area right now. So yes.
okay. So you told me a story about when you came here, and kind of it was this wild series of events that brought you here, and where you're originally from, the South Carolina, right? From the East Coast.
Well, the journey started, well, it started before that time, but we made our way to California from South Carolina. I'm originally from Virginia.
Okay, okay.
So,
So what happened
East
there?
Coast.
What and how did you use your intuition along that route, bringing you from where you were on that side of the country to this side?
Okay, fair enough. The journey for that, Josh, and we spoke about this, but for a lot of our viewers, I'll catch them up to that. The journey really didn't start in South Carolina. The journey really started in Virginia, Tennessee area. And this was in 2000, 2001, and I was in school at the time, and honestly, I just hated school. I'm not against formal education, but it just wasn't in my flow, and I always knew that, but I did it anyway. And around 2000, 2001, in the middle of the year, I remember waking up in at the middle of the night with this ringing voice just around me, inside of me, and the voice said, "You are going to Los Angeles." So that's definitely a surprising and interesting way to wake up in the middle of the night with saying that you're going to Los Angeles. And I will tell it, I've never had never been to Los Angeles other than the move. I had no desire to go to Los Angeles. If you had asked me then, and probably sometime still now, I would rather be in Charleston, South Carolina. Love the area. And so Los Angeles was just never in my cards as I felt at the time. So I completely rejected that and completely ignored that. And I said, you know what, I'm going to do whatever I want to do. Until about 2006 came around, and life was good. Life was great. We had a restaurant at the time. My husband and I, we had a good amount of money saved up in the bank. I think at the time we had two, maybe three cars. We had a vacation home in Charleston, South Carolina. Again, loved the place. And life was really, really going well. I was doing teaching and speaking still at the time, and we had the restaurant. And one day in the middle of the restaurant, that voice came back again as clear as day, and this time it was a little more assertive. And the voice said, I said, you are going to Los Angeles. Um,
So it was serious this
it's
time.
funny now, Josh. Yes, anytime that you add I said to it, I mean, that seals the deal.
Right.
I do that with my kids all the time. I said. And so the second time that came, I mean, you're talking about a span of about 5 years or so, and it came again with the same level of intensity, with the same level of importance, and this time there was a stronger sense of urgency with it. And I was in a different place then as well. And I will tell you, immediately after I heard that, everything started to shift. Everything started to transition really to make way for me coming or us moving to California. Um, I used to say all hell broke loose once I heard the voice the second time, and I've learned to reframe that because, well, I'll explain why I reframed that later, but I have since reframed that to say everything started to shift. So, I mean, overnight the restaurant we started losing clients, we stopped making money. Anything that could go wrong at the restaurant did. Anything that could break did. We went through every bit of money we had in the bank account. We ended up losing one of the cars at the time. It got repossessed. I think we had lost another car at the time. We were in the process of losing our house. We had to move out of our wonderful house that we owned into a two-bedroom apartment because the house was going into foreclosure. All of that happened really after I heard that voice of I said you were moving to Los Angeles. And the fast track of that, really, I ended up having to file for bankruptcy. I lost the restaurant. I mean, everything totally transitioned within what felt like a couple of hours.
Wow.
And if that wasn't enough, I think at this time I really said, okay, well, spirit, as I call it, some call it God or universe or a higher purpose, higher power, but I call it spirit. So I knew spirit was serious at this time, and at this point, I was learning to be engaged and learning to get in that flow. So I said, you know what? Here it is, God. Here it is, spirit. If you want me to move to Los Angeles, two things need to happen, and you should be careful what you pray for, Josh. What you put out there in the universe, because the universe always answers with a yes.
You never know, you might get
So
it.
this was a you never know. You might get it, and usually you do get it. It's just a matter of when you get it.
Right.
So this was a Thursday that I said this. It was a Thursday night, and I said I need two things. I need time alone, so I can really sense into where I am and figure out what the purpose is for moving to Los Angeles. The second thing is I need money to move to Los Angeles because if you haven't figured it out, God, we don't have any money, so we could barely pay our bills, but yet you want me to move 3,000 miles across the country. So that was a Thursday. On Friday, I had a job by this time. That's another story. But I had a job. I went to work that Friday and got in a workplace accident. So which led me, I actually crushed my foot at work. So it left me bedridden for 5 months with my leg up in the air. So the first thing came true. I got my time, and then out of that workplace accident, I actually got a settlement, small amount, but it was enough to actually get us to California. So then the second thing came true, which is I got the money. So time and money happened. So then from there, um, we really just started working through the process of moving to Los Angeles. We started getting rid of things. I got the wonderful idea. I was going to send this wonderful, sweet girl roughly $4,000 through Western Union to secure an apartment. We started making the plans. Day of moving towards Los Angeles, I had a couple of job offers lined up, or interviews anyway. And I remember we had so many things that happened during that process. My husband had a dream that we were going to get a U-Haul on the way, and I said that's not happening. What doesn't fit in our two cars is not going. We sold everything, and I bought a little, GMC Jimmy that on the way in rush hour traffic in Atlanta broke down, and that was
Oh, wow.
wonderful. And yeah, we lost a couple of days from there. I think it was about 2 days we lost. It broke down again, I believe, in Mississippi, and this time I think the oil pan or something went out. The first time it was the fuel pump, and then the third time, now mind you, any money that we did have was dwindling down. Any time that we had was going away, and then the car that we had purchased kind of was unstable at this point. To go to somewhere because I heard a voice in my head, right? So totally
Right.
crazy. And
So how
so
did you turn this
that was
around?
Oh well, what happened off of that is the third time that the car broke down was in the middle of the night, totally caught on fire. We're on the side of the road with scripture verses just flying around our head and everything. It's just hilarious. We got here to California. I mean, and it was one of those either we're supposed to be here or we just really missed the boat. But we decided to really to really say this is the path that we were chosen to walk down, or we created for ourselves, and we just really committed to the process. And then by the time we got to LA, to make a very long story short, we found out that we were scammed out of the $4,000 for the apartment, had to come up with another $4,000 for another apartment. By this time, the bank account was already negative $2,000, and I still don't have a job. And this was in June 22nd, 2008. So you can imagine the level of anxiety that one would go through being in the city of LA with over 10 million people, no job, no friends, no family, no money, just off of hearing a voice saying you're going to LA. And I will say it was during that process that really helped me to be very comfortable in knowing when you have those unctions, that intuition really guiding you, things just work out. They're not always comfortable, but they always work out. And so it's been that type of journey pretty much through every step of California that's led us to this point now. And so a lot of my intuition I really use to help other people to get past the blocks and the fear that a lot of us deal with on a regular basis to really, again, it's part of the construction process of our life.
Very cool. Very cool. I mean, I'm listening to your story, and there's just like there's a lot of little elements in there, like just finding, first off, just like what you ask for. Be careful what you ask for. Be specific in that request. Like you asked for time and money, and
Yes,
you got it. Not maybe not in the way you
got it.
wanted it. um, you followed that intuition. You decided that okay, this is what I want, and I'm committed to doing it, and you stuck with that. But along with that, and here's what I think is what is interesting about this is just like you said, everything fell apart along the way. You've changed that to now it's in transition, right? I love that. I love that when we
Yes.
talked before, you mentioned that too. But how often with clients that you work with now, how often does that happen when they answer the call or they set a new intention and they start going along the path of whatever that may be for them? How often how often do you see it where their life falls apart, goes in transition. How often do you see that happening with people that you work with?
It's interesting. Well, one, I I very rarely see it happen with that level of intensity that mine happened. Um, I think the way my process worked, it had to happen that way or needed to happen that way so I can help other people. But I will say in every case that always happens, and I feel that that is the universal God's way of really matching the energy that we're coming with and really helping us to really buckle down and a lot of times I'll say anchor down in the decisions we're making. And it really pulls into question our intent and our motives behind what we do. I've done coaching before on a business level and a lot of times or other life coaches and a lot of times I'll ask the question is do you want to help people because you generally want to help people, or do you want to help people because you can make money in the process? Because those are two different intents altogether, and the level or the energy of your intent determines the energy that you get back. So I think sometimes we we can interpret that as a bad thing or a negative thing. So a lot of times what I try to do is get people to really redefine or reframe that from it not being a bad thing or a negative thing, but it really being something like a resistance. And because some resistance is good, but we
Right.
often translate that as a bad thing. But going back to your question, oftentimes I find that when people put that intention out there, there's usually a matching energy that says, "Do you really believe this? Is this really the direction you want to go? Is this really what you say that you want? And if so, let me bring some resistance in your path to help challenge you to a greater purpose and to get beyond that."
So let's dig into this now. So you set an intention for something, or you've got a call, or you felt an intuition for something, and you start along that path, but then life happens, right? How do you
Life
manage that? How
happens.
do you react to that? And how do you know stay on the path, or decide to quit, or decide to change directions? How do you work through that?
Well, that's a great question, and I appreciate you asking that. I think the first thing is really reframing your what you're expecting. Because here's the deal. I think most people we've learned or been conditioned to really translate everything from a good or a bad scenario. And from a universal standpoint or from an energy standpoint, things just don't operate that way, especially on an intuition level. Everything is, I have a saying that I say quite often, which is, I am for good and against nothing. And since everything is good, nothing is against me. And I am against nothing. And what that always puts me in a frame of mind that says everything that I'm experiencing is ultimately to get me to what I am saying that I want. And off of that, sometimes resistance does come into play, but it's not bad. Here's the deal: we all drive cars. I'm going to be going to a workshop after this. I want my car to have a level of resistance. We call that brakes, because anytime that I go too fast or something enters into my environment or my atmosphere, that resistance helps to guard me. We
It's
don't
a
think of
good
brakes
it's a
as a
good
bad thing.
resistance.
We look at it as it's a good resistance. And I think a lot of times reframing, everyone's mentality of, you know what, that thing you call a setback is not really a setback. It's a level of resistance that's coming in to either to ground you, to anchor you, to slow you down, to get you to balance yourself out a little bit more. It's doing a lot of things, but ultimately it's partnering with you in your process that you are creating. So that's one thing, if that makes sense
No,
to
no, it
you.
totally makes sense. It totally makes sense. So I'm
Mhm.
just, yeah, you're almost saying, like, those things that come along the way, they're there to help strengthen you. So like, can you give me an
They are.
example? Can you give me an example of in your life where you've set an intention, or you've had the intuition, and the resistance has come? I mean, certainly you shared the coming across story, but like, something whether that's coming up, and then how do you handle it? Like, how do you respond to it?
I that's a great question. I would reframe it from this standpoint of we all have things that we're constantly putting out there that are constantly being met with a level of energy. For instance, we have all said, you know what, I need to be more patient. I need to be, you know what, I'll use this from a standpoint because we probably have a lot of viewers that
Patience is a tough one. You ask for
have some,
patience, you never know what you're going to get with that.
right. You never know what you're going to get with that. Or you know what? I need to be a better steward of my money. That's a really good one because oftentimes what happens is, you know what? I need to do better about my finances, or I need to put more finances towards my business, or more finances in savings. Almost like clockwork. What will generally happen is you will go to Best Buy and you will there'll be a sale, and it'll be that one thing that you've been looking at for 6 months. And that's a resistance that has just entered your environment to say, do you really have an intent to save, or do you really have an intent to not spend as much money so you can buy more things that you really want?
Right.
What is your intent?
Or is that the time
And
when the water
oftentimes,
heater breaks or the car breaks down? Is that also the same time?
absolutely,
Yeah.
you know, and it comes at those times. And I think those are things that help really ground you in knowing, is this really what you want? Or is this something that sounds good to you, but you're not really ready to commit to at this moment? Either way is okay. Part of intuition really helps you to focus that energy in, so you can start asking more specific questions, so you can start getting more specific results, and ultimately you can start being very comfortable with your intuition, because ultimately that's what it comes down to. If you Part of intuition is getting very comfortable and having a relationship with it, where when intuition speaks, or you get a feeling or you get a sensing, I say a lot of times a sensing, that you really work without restraint and you really work without resistance yourself. So those things always happen. It's just a matter of reframing your process to say, hey, what am I learning through this process? What is this resistance coming in to teach me at this moment?
Is there anything that you can do in the moment? Like I know reframing is a good thing, but sometimes it's like it's such it can be so in your face, like whatever the situation is. Like how do you cope with it in the moment?
That's a good question. Here's what I often tell people to do. It's okay. So when we talk about intuition, I'll generally divide it up into two things. Intuition, I view it as a two-part. It is all spiritual, but it's also all systematic, and I think you need both. I used to do training in McDonald's, and I mean, all the training I did, and I've done this with other businesses before, is going in to build a system. The problem with a lot of us is sometimes we don't understand the spirit of the system or the spirit behind it, and we've also all experienced this. You go to that grocery store, or you go to that convenience store or place, and there's a policy, and you're talking to the cashier or whoever, and you're asking them to do something, and they say a term like, oh, well, the policy says this. And then the manager comes in and changes the policy because they know the spirit behind the system. So I view intuition very much
The
in that
intent of the
category.
law,
So
almost.
oftentimes, the intent of the law, right?
Okay.
Exactly. But a lot of times, what we do is we don't really own that. And what do I mean by that? I really mean that a lot of times we get these feelings about us and we internalize it. And here's the deal: Josh, myself, all of our viewers, we all talk to ourselves. We just don't all admit it. But but we all have some level that we're internally talking to ourselves. The problem is we don't do one of two things. We don't really engage fully into that emotion to really understand it, and two, we don't counteract and replace that emotion. So I'll talk about the first one. Oftentimes when we start to have those emotions of frustration and anger, you know what? Sometimes I get very impatient in certain grocery stores that will remain nameless, and so when I get in those moments, I immediately just say, what am I feeling right now? I am feeling angry. I am feeling upset. I am feeling frustrated. I am feeling left behind. I am feeling violated because someone, cut in front of me in the line. I am feeling agitated. And a lot of times we don't really take ownership of that feeling. Um, and we'll often say things like, I'm mad, I'm sad, but that's not really what you should say. You should really own into the emotion of it, because if you don't own into it, it's very difficult to overcome it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to learn to get out of your head. And I always tell people, when you start having those internal dialogues within yourself, you need to start speaking verbally. Because what happens on an energetic or spiritual level, when you speak, it actually disrupts the process of thinking, and actually uses a different brain pattern, if you want to call it that, or a different energy. What actually happens is when we speak something, our body translates that into truth, and then it starts to work off of that which is truth, not that which is so cerebral in us. So even if I'm starting to think, I'm upset, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, and I'm internalizing all this, I would generally say, I am working through peace. I asked for this moment. I am learning to be patient in this moment. There's an opportunity for me to affect someone at this moment. I start to verbalize that, and what happens is intuition really the energy starts to shift and to bring that opportunity to by my way, and then all of a sudden, within a few seconds, oh yeah, I was angry, I was upset, I was sad, but now I'm looking for the opportunity for me to practice patience, and that was exactly what I was asking for initially.
Wow, that's really cool. I've never
Yeah,
thought about that. To like just kind of
yeah.
stop and is it almost like a is it an affirmation, or are you just kind of talking through the scenario, or how do you prepare for this before before that happens? Do you have or you just
Mhm.
kind of just think about it and just go with it?
Here's the thing with affirmations, Josh. I I think affirmations are great. I think affirmations are a tool. I think affirmations are a system. But oftentimes we get so hung up in the system that
You forget the
it becomes
intent.
very difficult to change. And that's why I had to go back to a tip, because when you start looking at intuition from a system-based mode, it really can not give you fully what you're asking for. And that's really a disservice to you, and it's a disservice to that which you're trying to accomplish. And a lot of times we're so conditioned to say, give me 3 steps, give me 3 techniques, give me 4 ways to get out of this. And I also tell my coaching clients that I don't have steps for you. I don't have a system in that place. I do have principles which are different. I have a guide which is different. There are things in place that help almost, you should think of we can think of intuition like this. If you've ever been, what is it, bumper cart? Ever done that, or ever went bowling and they have the rails that they put up?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's almost like that. Intuition really are those guardrails that get placed in our life to help keep us on track. But here's the deal: the guardrails are not always going to be there, but in this moment, they're there. And for me to say, oh well, I have to drive, my car with the bumper rails up would just be crazy, because the bumper rails don't exist on the highway. You need to learn how to work and flow off of the principles of safe driving, but not always being reliant upon having safety rails up. So a lot of times we get hung up on having those systems in place, like affirmations. And the other side of affirmations, a lot of times we a lot of times we're not really honest by why we're doing affirmations, and a lot of times what we're really doing is we're really trying to psych ourselves out of a certain feeling, but we really won't own the feeling. So we'll say, you know what, I am wealthy, I am powerful, I am, I am influential, I am all these things. And really what you're telling inside yourself is you're saying, I am weak. I don't think I can do it. I feel inferior. That's really what you're saying, and your internal voice always wins out, regardless of what you're actually telling yourself, because the words that you say through affirmations aren't really a truth. They're just a system with no spirit behind it.
Right. There's no emotion behind it. It's just the words, but
Right.
what's still in
Just
the
the word.
nervous system is something else.
Right. Absolutely. So, not to say not to do affirmations. I'm just saying, if you're going to do affirmations, learn what your intent really is behind it, and really the root of those emotions. Because oftentimes, anyone that does affirmations, they immediately start having feelings. Like if you say, Josh, if you told yourself, you know what, I'm going to be a billionaire by the end of this month. Well, there are not a lot of months or days in the end of this month, and so reality does come in. And while you want to say this is possible, I would love for it to happen. I would love to be a billionaire by the end of the month, on Saturday. Your body, your spirit, your energy knows that's probably not going to happen. So oftentimes I'll tell people, especially with affirmations, try not to say affirmations that you will not commit to yourself to do, that you do not commit to as truth, because what you're training yourself to do is to really walk in a untruth, or to walk in a lie, and you've conditioned yourself to believe that which is false rather than that which is true. So when intuition comes into your life, it becomes very difficult to recognize which way to go and what your sensing is telling you, because we've conditioned ourselves to believe that which is not of us. If that makes sense, Josh.
It does, and I'm curious on that because so how do you find that truth? Like I think that's part of what we're all looking for is how do you find that piece?
Yeah, great question. I have this term that I say, find the anchors. You know, we all have patterns in our life, Josh. I mean, every one of us. I spent quite a bit last night just thinking off of my own internal patterns and my spiritual patterns, my how I think, how I operate last night. And a lot of times I'll tell people to go back to your childhood. What have people always said about you? What have you always done? I always give an example with myself. When I was a wee little boy, my mom used to get so mad at me because she would give me squirt guns and other toys, and I would totally just dismantle them and take them apart. And I would have three or four water guns, and I would piece it together into this huge, hybrid of a gun. Now, obviously, Josh, the gun didn't work after I took it apart. But it's so funny. I found myself in that same deconstructive or destroying manner in a lot of phases of my life. I did that in McDonald's. I did that in business consulting because really, business consulting or analysis, all you're doing is going in there and deconstructing the process to rebuild it up again.
Right. Yeah.
That's all it is. Life coaching, all you're doing is going in and analyzing the situation, deconstructing someone's false thinking or negative thinking or limited beliefs, and you're reconstructing a stronger potential in them. It's the same thing, but the way it manifested when I was 6 was I broke apart some toys. And so going back to that, I tell people that is the most authentic way of really gaining root and also anchoring down because think of intuition like this. Think of intuition like you're in the middle of a sea and you have everything at your disposal, but there's a vast isness. There's a lot of vastness around us. There's a lot of things underneath you. There's a lot of things that are happening around you. The wind is blowing. The waves are tossing. There are fish that are underneath you that you don't even know. There's a lot of life underneath you, around you that are really gearing you and directing your ship in some way. So part of what I tell people, you need that anchor because that anchor helps you to actually understand where you are. Because that's not changing. The same way I used to break toys when I was 6, I do the same thing now. I do it in a different way. I thankfully I do it a little more diplomatically and a little more consciously, especially because I'm dealing with people's lives. But it's all in that general standpoint of when I talk to someone intuitively or however way, I am deconstructing everything about what they're telling me and what I'm getting with them, and I'm helping them to rebuild something that they really, really want. But that did not happen until I actually learned to have that anchor that says this will never change. This trait of me doesn't. Some people, it's different. You know what? Like I know one thing with Beyonce. She was, and you can look at videos on YouTube or wherever. She was always singing. She was always performing. That hasn't changed now. Probably will never change with her because that's who she is. That's her essence. I think going back to intuition, the same thing works too. We generally I generally teach 5, 6 senses with, generally taste, touch, smell, hearing, feeling, things like that. Even with all of us, we have we all have the five senses at some point, at some level, but some senses are just stronger than others. I know with me, my sense of hearing is extremely acute. It's just very strong. With it, I hear a lot of things. My sight, my visionary intuition is extremely strong. There are other things I've had to work on as far as that goes regarding intuition. I've not anchored down on those things per se. Like for instance, I'm not necessarily always a feeler, or empath as some of my other spiritual people are. They are. That's their anchor. My anchor is I hear it, I see it. And so that's where I work off of. So I also tell people, find your anchor, whatever that is, and learn to be very comfortable and stable in that where you're not tossed back and forth off the waves. And at that moment, then we can work from there.
And you're defining this anchor as that sense that you can trust or that peace? What?
The anchor is that which grounds all of who you are. That's really the base way of saying that. What is always consistent? What never has changed? What will never change? What do you always go back to? Because even Josh, if you look at your own life, I'm sure you've had several jobs. I don't know what your relationships have been. You've gone through several friends, all of that. You generally go back to one way of thinking, one way of operating. We all do that. We have a way of operating. That's your anchor. It's not bad. It's not good. It just is. And if you can learn to hone that in, that's something that just never changes. And when you talk about things like intuition, where you're at the whim, at least as it feels sometimes, where you feel like it's a little out of control, you feel like it's not you, you feel like you know you're being the puppet master, being played as the puppet master. You need an anchor that keeps you very solid and very stable, that keeps you very authentic to who you are. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I think I get a sense of that.
Yeah.
It's just and that's I mean that's a challenging process because I've gone through experiences like that where you start
Hmm.
to wonder like who you know you start to see those patterns like who were you as a kid and
Right.
start seeing the things over and over and over again. Um,
Right.
so
And
then
those things, I think, a lot of times we don't find significance in those things. Or we've taught ourselves that those things are not significant. So what we do is we put up this resistance ourselves, and we've actually put up a block that says the answer will not come by this means. The solution will not come through this person. And we ourselves have put those things in place because we have found those things to be insignificant.
hmm so then you have to kind of start the process of breaking that down, right? Is that kind of
Absolutely. Oh yes, I would say typically the first thing the first thing I have people to do is really how can we deconstruct a lot of where you think you are into something that's very stable and something that's very very true. And then from there, that's the thing that you um, we have for the name of this webinar is designing the lifestyle you want. I think that's excellent because a lot of the first part of intuition is really designing that initial sketch. And I find a lot of people don't really take value in doing that. Really, this is who is Josh Sharp? How does Josh Sharp look in relationships? How does Josh Sharp look in the grocery store? Who is Josh in as a parent, as a father, as a husband, as a friend, as a coworker? How does that sketch look? Because here's the reality: even if you're operating off of full intense psychic ability, knowing, sensing, it's going to be very difficult for you to recognize that truth if you have not first put it out there as something that you will actually accept. Because
right?
things are in our path all the time. Things are being communicated to us all the time. And likewise, we're rejecting a lot of things all of the time simply because we don't identify it as an answer to what we're asking.
Right. No, it totally makes
Yeah,
sense. So you start to break down like each little area of your life, like what's in almost in like different roles in your life. So if you're
absolutely.
and you start to say, okay, how do I show up in this role? Like what's my responsibility in this role? How do I act? Who am I in this role? Is that kind of the process that
Hmm.
you're doing with that?
Yes, absolutely. Like for instance, going back on the intuitive side of things, a lot of times when I am around people, I immediately start hearing or seeing certain things. And so oftentimes when I am teaching people how to work in their intuition, for instance, off of hearing, um, oftentimes we will get certain things and we'll kind of shrug it off, or we all get intuition. We all operate intuition. We just don't know it all the time. A lot of times we'll call it certain things like, oh, I got a gut feeling, or I kind of knew that was going to happen, or this is a deja vu moment. I felt like I had a dream, felt like we met before. That's all intuitively based. We just don't recognize it as such. So a lot of times when I'm around people, I'll hear certain things, and it will be something as simple as, for instance, if I were using you, Josh, I might be around you, and I might hear something that says career change, something very vague like career change. And so oftentimes people
This
will
is
get
this
that
is you
intuitive
listening.
sensing.
This is you listening to your intuition as somebody's talking with you. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes. Me listening to my intuition as someone else is talking to me,
Gotcha.
or
Gotcha.
as
Okay.
I'm around someone else, right? So then I might get something like career change. And then what I've learned to do on that is to not block that, because intuition is a progressive movement. And as you really submit to one energy, the energy keeps building upon itself. It's almost like going from A to Z. A lot of times in people I deal with on an intuition level, everyone wants to be at level D or F without really going through the process of A, B, and C. And that first step is really saying, okay, Josh, I'm getting career change from you. And then the person that's learning their intuition would generally say something to the effect of, oh, are you getting a new job? and they'll be very, very direct with it oftentimes.
Right.
And I would
Okay.
generally teach people is learn to be more open, question minded, to start to feel your way through what you're sensing. So, for instance, instead of me saying, Josh, you're getting a new job, I will then ask you a question. Josh, is there something happening in your career right now? Are you thinking about making a move? And I will teach people to do that because it helps you to gauge where your intuition is leading you, not you jumping ahead of your intuition.
Right.
And
And then
oftentimes,
you're connecting with the
that's what will
individual
happen.
too then.
And you're connecting with the individual, and you're allowing that in. And what will happen is, as you honor that intuition, honor that energy force, what happens is that person brings that same level of energy back, but it's not resistant at this moment.
Right.
It's really in the flow of the movement, and then universe and spirit comes along and says, ah, great, you handled level A beautifully. Let's go on to level B. So then level B might, you might come back and tell me something like, you know what, I've been having some thoughts, and I don't know if I want to be in the same career field, or I kind of like where I am, and then I might get something still on the sensing or the hearing standpoint that says, you know what, is there a promotion that you would like to get? Is there a new branch of your current job that you would like to be in? I'm feeling like you really want to stay where you are, but you're not getting challenged in where you are. Would it help if you were promoted? And then you might respond with something that kind of says, you know what, that's exactly it. There's this new promotion that's coming up, and I'm really fearful about applying for it, and I just don't know what to do. Now we have something to work with. And that's very tangible intuition that I try to help people to learn to work with versus jumping into the assumptive mode, if that makes sense to you, Josh.
No, it totally makes sense. I mean, it's fascinating,
Yeah.
just like because you have inadvertently, just like when you're a kid breaking down those guns, you have kind of broken this down into smaller elements. I mean, just outside of just, well, I got a gut feeling and I'm going to trust it, or I hear this little voice. I mean, you've almost taken this whole process and chunked it down into smaller steps, and just been able to recognize it and been able to think about it at
Yes.
different places. So
Yes.
where are we in your process? Like after you've figured all that out, what do you do next? Like, how do you then make a decision to act on it?
Well, and I think that's sometimes this is where having a system in place sometimes can not work to the advantage of certain people. So, for instance, if I might have just, if we were using that same example, I might have just come into your life at that moment just to simply encourage you to say, you know what, maybe you shouldn't be so fearful of taking that promotion. You know what, you should go ahead and do it. Sometimes, I tend to operate a little bit differently, so sometimes I'm a little more direct, or I get more direct answers. So sometimes my direct answers are, you know what, that's just not the job. There is another job that's coming up in about a month or so, which is in the career field that you like. You need to really be patient at the job that you have right now, and not sacrifice it and not lose motivation, and just be patient. So sometimes mine comes in that way. Sometimes my intuition says I get certain things, but I'm also not at liberty to say. So there is a level of resistance that says you should wait, you should hold out. Or sometimes it's a matter of I get a feeling on the sensing side with someone, and I would just say, you know what? Rather than me saying, hey, Spirit told me, or I intuitively got that you need money, sometimes I would just say, you know what? Here's $20. Or sometimes I'll just go and do something for somebody that, that I don't have to give always the explanation to. And that's just a different level of operating. That's not really system-based operating. It's more about what's the principle, what's the intent behind what you're doing, what your intuition is saying. And when you do that, and I think it's necessary, Josh, too, because think about your own relationship. If you if you did the same thing every day with your spouse, and you said I love you at the same time every day, if you ate the same meal every time every day, that would not really be a relationship. That would be a system.
Right. And you get
And
bored.
intuition
You get
doesn't
bored.
work that way.
There's no
You get
variety
bored.
there, right?
Right. And a lot of times, and I see this a lot. I see this in the coaching realm right now. I see this in the mentoring realm. I see this in the self-improvement realm a lot. Definitely on the spirituality realm, this happens more often than not as well, is that people want the system, but sometimes they don't really understand the necessity of the relationship with it. the relationship with your intuition, because that's really what makes it lively. It makes it fun as well. I'll tell you, no day is the same. And even when I hear things, the things I hear, the things I see are never the same, even if the people are the same. And so it makes it very fun. It's being with that person in a relationship that you love. They make life exciting. Everything's always different. Everything's always fresh. That's what really intuition is about, is how do we access that communication that's always going on without judging it and without putting a filter up and just really allowing it to come into your life. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Before and I'm going to try to honor. I know you got to get moving here at the top of the hour, and I want to honor that. Before, because I want to ask you about like what what you got going on. But before I do that, I just want to hear like, because we've talked a lot about some of the challenges, but like I want to hear like one, like what's a good story, what's a like give me like a success story where like this is just like you set on this path and it's like radically changed your life to like in any area.
In any area. I will give you one that, it's okay, Josh. I feel like I have so many. I would tell you that the life of the intuitive person is never a dull moment. It just really isn't. I'll give you this one, Josh. We had about a year ago, I believe it was about a year, maybe a year and a half. We were in Van Nuys, still in California, and we had a two-bedroom apartment. We had 3 children at the time. And my husband was having a conversation with me, and we were painting. He was really painting. I was watching. And this was on a Thursday. Actually, a Friday, we were having this conversation. And he said, "You know what? What are your thoughts? What are you feeling as far as us moving, finding another place?" And I said, "Well, you know what? I'm really not getting anything at this moment. What I have planned is, I think in about a year or so, we're planning to move." And because it's so funny, because everyone that knows me, that knows the intuitive side of me, also knows I'm a very analytical person. I plan. And for every 3 plans I have 3 more backup plans. So I don't want to make it seem that people that are intuitive are just these fly by night, spontaneous people, because we're not that way. So I say, you know what? I see it in about a year or so. Let us save money, because we really don't have money. At least I thought at the time, to move, and just conditions. I don't know where we want to move, any of that. And so this was a Friday evening. Friday night, my husband has a dream. So Saturday morning, we're having a conversation. He wakes up laughing, and he says, "Ha ha ha! I had a dream that we were going to be moving very soon." And that's all the dream was. It was just he got this feeling in the dream that we were going to be moving. So I said, well, let me honor that, because there's something happening. That, again, what I said before, Josh, about that communication. There's a dialogue happening. Whether I have fully accessed that or tapped into that communication, it's still going on. I would love to be on the forefront of that conversation, so I can help to really maneuver and manage what's about to happen. Because oftentimes, you said it earlier, a lot of times we're very reactive in our lives, simply because we just won't commit to where we want to go. So we had a good dialogue, and I said, okay, well, let me figure out what that's about. I'm not getting anything, but if you did, there's a dialogue happening. So I went online. Long story short, I saw this one house. I called the person about the house. I said, hey, I would like to come and look at the house whenever you're available. And this was a Saturday. They said, hey, what about tomorrow, coming to look at it? That was Sunday. So we said, sure. Came to look at the house, and we kind of looked at each other, and we said, okay. Now, mind you, the backstory of this, we had already written down a lot of things that we wanted out of a house, how it would look, how it would flow, hardwood flooring to be a good entertainment home, the general location. I mean, we picked a lot of things before we got to this point. So when we got up to the house, we were like, okay. So that was Sunday. Monday, we put down a deposit on the house. That following Saturday, we moved into the house that we're currently living in.
Wow.
And yeah, we did all that in a week. So I will say a lot of our life is really like that. And some things happen within a week process. Sometimes things happen within hours, within days, sometimes within seconds. And sometimes it's just with us. Sometimes it's with strangers I meet on the street. Sometimes it's with friends I've known for years, or with family members. But it's an interesting life. And I will say I have learned to live in that intuitive state, because and I really encourage anyone that is interested in living in an intuitive lifestyle and really designing that lifestyle that you want. It is such an effortless, such a fearless, such a encouraging place to live. It's also very humorous because things just happen now. Because we've just learned to flow in that. That I tell everyone, if we, from a financial standpoint, if we looked at sustaining what we have now or have it done all the things we were supposed to do and moving to California, we wouldn't be here. It makes no financial sense. It makes no physical sense. It makes no intellectual sense. It makes no sense how we were able, or even now able to do the things we're doing outside of intuition has led, and I have just answered that call. That's
Wow.
really it.
Wow. Well, thank you
Yeah.
very much for sharing. I greatly appreciate that, and it's awesome to
You're
hear
welcome.
stories like that, and it is really powerful. And I think you've contributed awesomely today. Thank you for really showing up and delivering this stuff. And I hope that people are listening, they'll be able to apply some of this stuff in their lives. I know certainly I've taken a few pages of notes, and I'll definitely be able to apply some of this stuff. But I'm curious. So how I know and when we talked before, you do events regularly, and you're actively speaking. If people wanted to learn more about you, what
Hmm.
certainly you've had your website's up. They can go to your website.
Yes.
But what's an event if they want to see you live, or what's something like that that they could take advantage of to interact with you a little bit more.
Thanks for asking about that, Josh, because we did. Um, we have a lot of things going on right now on that
Right.
side. I would say one of my
An
passions is
insanely
really
busy
helping
man.
other people. It's crazy busy. As I mentioned before, when I get off this webinar, I'm going to be heading 2 hours to do a like 2 or 3 hour workshop again, to drive back 2 hours back home. So,
Wow.
but you know what? I love it. Wouldn't have it any other way. And so, a lot of my passion is really helping other people to learn to live in that space because it's such a great place to live. It honestly is. And so one of the things I'm calling it is the sensing, is how do you really access all five senses, or that sixth sense, if you will, that spiritual sense that God says about you, to really have and design that life that you want. And so we have a couple of workshops really lined up. Well, outside of everything else I do, like you can go to calvinwitcher.com, or the participants can go to calvinwitcher.com. You'll see my information about mentoring and coaching. I'm doing a special right now, a gratuity mentoring, where it's pretty much donation based for now to the end of June. You can pretty much give anything you want, and I'll take you on as a client for a month, and you can evaluate. The level of success that we will both achieve. You'll totally be happy. But
It sounds like you
the
listen to
only catch is you have to.
John's Zoom interview.
You know what? It's so funny. I had but I
But
still
I
have
can
not
drop
watched
you.
all of that. And no, it's okay. It's okay. And I had already made plans to do that and already had it on the website. And then when I heard about that, I said, "That's so interesting, so funny." But Sean's a great guy.
Yeah.
And so the only catch is that you have to do it at least a dollar. So that's that catch. So because you got to have some skin in the game. Um, but I don't want the money to be a barrier to entry. And oftentimes, especially in this self-improvement, spirituality standpoint, if you don't have a couple $1,000s to drop down, sometimes you can't get the help you need. So I want to remove that. So that's one. The second thing is if the participants want to go to thesensing.com, so that's THESENSING.com, they'll find information about a web workshop we have coming up soon. And it's actually a two-part. It's on intuition. And then I'm bringing in a good friend of mine, Benny, and he's going to do another day on numerology, pretty much spiritually driven. And the intuition site, or the intuition workshop, is going to be twofold. It's going to be one, a workshop that we're really going to dive in depth with the five senses, and we're going to do a lot of breakout sessions with how do you really develop all of your senses, and we're going to break you into groups of all the clairvoyant people, all the empath people, all the people that have a strong sense of sight. We're going to put you together and teach you how to hone that in. And then at the end of that workshop, we're actually going to put it into practice. So we're going to have like a one-on-one session. We're going to help people with what are you actually getting, bringing people into the audience there to make it very tangible. Because a lot of times I find on the spirituality standpoint, we don't really have people that mentor us through the process. So I really want to take people that are really interested in developing that intuitive side to say, hey, come, we'll help you learn how to, one, understand what it is you're feeling and have always felt, and then two, how do you make it work in your life? And then from there, we're going to segue into the second portion with another day. The intuition workshop is going to be July the 19th, and then the other workshop on numerology is going to be July the 26th. And all of that information, if they go to thesensing.com, or if you go to my website, calvinwitcher.com, you'll see the information there as well. So that's what's going on, Josh, right now.
Very cool, very cool. And what
It's
I'll
going to
do
be
is
intense.
I'll take both of those sites, and because this will upload to YouTube after this, and I'll put um,
Okay.
the links to those after this, after that's all set, and I'll send that back out to you. Is there, so they can get the details for so you have one in workshop on the 19th, and another on the 26th, and all the details are on there. Do they have to sign up there? Is there a fee for that, or how does that work?
There is a sign up form, and also one of the things I wanted to do as a thank you for having me on your webinar, your webcast here. I was going to extend a 20% discount out to our viewers that are watching, and also feel free to pass this along to anybody on your mailing list that you want to. There's a promo code section. Just enter JS 2014, and it'll give the participants 20% off.
Oh, that's kind of cool. Thank you. I didn't expect that.
You're welcome.
Cool.
Thank you.
Well, then they.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you for being here and sharing a lot of cool stuff. And I hope if you're listening, you can take advantage of that, because that sounds like a cool thing. Maybe I think I'm going to be up in San Francisco at that time. Maybe I know you mentioned about doing something. We'll have to link up at some point here in the next few months.
Yes.
But is there anything else?
Well, the other thing, Josh, too, is there's also an option. And I'm glad that you said that, because I almost forgot. We also are offering a live cast, a live video, streaming or live stream as well. And again, all that's on the website. It's for different prices, of course. But if you can't come in person, please just join the live stream. You'll be able to ask questions. You'll see exactly what's going on. So we want to have all of our people that are joining us by live stream just as participatory in the process as those that would be there for the workshop.
Very cool. Very cool. That's kind of cool thing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else before we completely wrap up? Is there anything that we didn't cover you want to talk about that you think is important for that you'd like people to know?
Josh, I think that if anything, the strongest thing I could really bring home to people is that you are already operating intuitively. I love to work with you. I have a couple of other people that I would love to partner up with you as well in that process. But you already operate and use that intuition. It's just a matter of really honing that in, understanding what that is, and really getting in that flow, because it's there. And I will say the necessity of living in that intuitive space is that in your intuition, all of your answers are there. And that is probably the most exciting thing about this, Josh, is that when you learn to live and design your life in intuition, all of the answers that we're seeking in business, relationships, in our personal life, all of those answers are there and just waiting for us to get into the flow of that intuition. So I encourage anyone that, and here's the deal. Let me also say this, because sometimes when you say intuition, sometimes people take it in a different way. It's not this spooky, spiritual, like hocus pocus type deal. It's also not goosebumps and whatever else. I have plenty of people that are very religious, some that are not religious, some that are very spiritual. Intuition is for everyone. We call it different things. Some of us call it a gut feeling. Some of us call it a lot of things, but we all operate in the same way. I am just coming here to help you understand how to use it a little more effectively for your life.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you, Calvin. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing this really cool stuff.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to be tapping into my intuition a little more and listening to that guidance. I think it's an ongoing process, and just practicing that.
Well, Josh, I love to work with you. So you call me, we'll get that process started.
We'll get it going.
We'll get it going.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Go ahead and stick around. and we're end the broadcast here, but just stick around. You and I can have a chat, and I know you got to run pretty soon. But thank you so much.
Sure.
Hope you've enjoyed this.
Thanks, everyone.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the YouTube channel on this. So we're putting up lots of videos like this kind of stuff. So come see us again. Thank you.
Thank you.